we are less than 2 weeks away from college football really getting into full swing. I haven't talked much about Ohio State football, mostly because I find a lot of the college football offseason stuff a bit of a futile attempt to keep up with recruiting and position battles. With recruiting, you can have scenarios where a team can seem to be having a lot of momentum to land a recruit for an entire cycle, and then at the last second they choose somewhere else inexplicably. And with position battles, a lot of these head coaches don't give the general public or the media really anything to work with as far as concrete information. They say a lot of words that pretty much amount to nothing. I mean, we aren't any closer to figuring out who the coaching staff and Ryan Day is leaning towards in the quarterback battle for Kyle McCord and Devin Brown, and that's been a known competition really ever since CJ Stroud graduated to the NFL. So I feel like we should just get into this schedule where at least we have some concrete information to work with, starting with, there is an elephant in the room that I will get to, but we're going to go through chronological order. If you just want to get to the elephant in the room, I understand. I will leave a timestamp there for you if you want to hover over the time of the video. You can skip right there if you would rather. But we're going to get into the beginning of the schedule, starting with September 2nd, the season opener on the road versus Indiana. This isn't going to be the normal week 1 game where you pay a team to come in and presumably lose, but it should have a bit of a similar vibe for Ohio State here. 24/7 Sports gives Indiana the worst incoming recruiting class in the Big Ten, 69th overall. Nice. I mean, recruiting rankings aren't everything, but this is a game where anything other than a convincing win is going to be cause for concern, where if it's going to be a close game and Ohio State has to pull away in the fourth quarter or something, we'll be wondering what's going on or what's going wrong with Ohio State so far. If they lose, it will be catastrophic. We're talking about discussing the season being over before it even starts. Then you have the Youngstown State and Western Kentucky games. Those are the games where you pay a school to come in to Columbus and, again, presumably lose. Then you're back on the road for Notre Dame, who is currently ranked 13th. It was a pretty close game in the Horseshoe last season. Hopefully for Ohio State, this team gets their feet under them in the first few weeks and their starting quarterback is established. So hopefully that will lead to a little bit more of a comfortable win over Notre Dame, although Notre Dame fans probably thinking the same thing, where if Notre Dame feels like they can get their feet under them early on in the season from an outside looking in perspective, and even to Ohio State fans like myself, Ohio State really hasn't looked this vulnerable coming into a season in a bit of a long time. So Notre Dame probably feeling antsy about that game, really wanting to get that game, especially when they're at home. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I think that will be a pretty good benchmark for what realistic expectations we can set for this Buckeye team moving forward. Then you have the bye week after Notre Dame, and then you get into the rest of the Big Ten schedule. Home against Maryland and away against Purdue, I feel very similar to those games to what I said about the Indiana game. However, we have seen obviously crazy things involving away games at Purdue, and Maryland did give Ohio State some issues last year. Talia Tagovailoa is still there for Maryland. If he can have himself a crazy game, who knows, they might pull some surprises here and there. But again, if Ohio State has issues against those teams, it's going to be more of what's going on with Ohio State, and they might not be as good as us Buckeye fans would hope they are. And then you get to Penn State, who is ranked 7th coming into the season. They're going to be at home in Columbus, so no Happy Valley crazy atmosphere to deal with there. The Nittany Lions do have a very highly touted recruiting class coming in, 2nd in the Big Ten, 14th overall in the nation, so they do have a lot of hype around them. They also have a quarterback battle of their own. Penn State fans probably excited to see something other than Sean Clifford at the quarterback position. Not trying to say his college career was horrible or anything. It was pretty good, but it was getting more and more clear that Sean Clifford was not going to be the quarterback that was capable of pushing Penn State to the highest of heights in college football. Now, if both of these teams are still undefeated, this matchup will definitely be between two top 10 teams at least. And looking at Penn State's schedule, I would say they would certainly expect themselves to be undefeated heading into this game. You do have Iowa and West Virginia there on the schedule, but I think Penn State fans are really expecting them to come out of those two games on top. Now, it was a very competitive game between Ohio State and Penn State last year. JTT going nuts defensively for Ohio State definitely helped them out there. But that game is going to be very interesting, another benchmark kind of game. Ohio State, after that game, is back on the road to play Wisconsin, ranked 19th. And they've always seemed to start, Wisconsin, the team, always seeming to start as a Big Ten West favorite. They could also be undefeated by the time they play Ohio State. They do have Washington State and Iowa to deal with, but the rest of their schedule should be pretty winnable for them. But again, Big Ten West teams have been they've been known to kind of falter when they shouldn't at times. Definitely not a gimme game by any stretch of the imagination. Wisconsin is ranked as they are for a reason, but I do think a loss to the Badgers that kind of sends the season on a spiral would be a bit disappointing for what Ohio State hopes to accomplish this year. Then Ohio State goes to Rutgers on the road. Then they have their night game against Michigan State at home, and then Minnesota at home as well. Those 3 games shouldn't cause too many problems, although Michigan State does have a pretty nice recruiting class coming in, so they could turn some heads and get things going and get themselves ranking in the top 25 by the time their game with Ohio State does happen. So now we're going to get to the elephant in the room. So on November 25th, Ohio State will be traveling to Ann Arbor to play Michigan, and the Wolverines should absolutely roll through their schedule. Their non-conference schedule is it's garbage. So even if Harbaugh is going to take this, 3-game suspension as I'm seeing being reported, I mean, Jim Harbaugh's wife and kid could take over as the head coach for the team, and they should still be able to win their first 3 games pretty easily. They don't play a currently ranked team until they meet Penn State on November 11th, and Michigan is going to be favorites in every game they play, including the one against Ohio State, because that is what they've earned. Michigan has won convincingly over the Buckeyes for the past 2 years, and there's a good reason why they're ahead of the Buckeyes on every single preseason poll you can imagine. The onus is now on the Buckeyes to prove that they can go into Ann Arbor and come out with a victory, because that's something that they've lost that assumption that they can just go in there and do it, because unfortunately for me, Michigan's been the better team, and that was one of the frustrating things about some of the reception I got for my video on the game last year, was some people saying, hey, Michigan deserved that win, and you're making excuses, and it definitely, it wasn't a fluke. And the reason it was frustrating was because I agreed with them. I completely understand why Michigan has won the last couple games, and that's going to come with Michigan getting the benefit of the doubt, because that's what they've earned. It's on Ohio State to go out there and prove that they can get back to where they can get this rivalry back to where it was, a few years ago, but at this point right now, the Michigan definitely has the upper hand in the game so far. Ohio State's going to have to answer a lot of questions against Michigan, and they can look solid all year and win convincingly, but until we see it against Michigan, those questions are still going to linger, because that is where Ohio State has faltered, especially not just to Ohio State fans, but to the national audience in general, where the last 2 times they've seen Ohio State, it was losing to Michigan in not a competitive game by the end of it, and then blowing a 14-point lead in the 4th quarter to Georgia. So there's a lot of questions about what Ohio State can do in big moments. Can their offensive and defensive line hold their ground against the Wolverines in the trenches? Can their secondary stop allowing those back-breaking impact plays that can turn a game's momentum on a dime? Can Kyle McCord or Devin Brown be a good clutch performer like we've seen out of J.J. McCarthy from Michigan? And can this Ohio State coaching staff make the necessary adjustments on both sides of the ball when something they anticipated working out isn't working out quite so well for them? And again, we can see those things manifest themselves in other games, but until they show it against Michigan, or if Penn State is as good as some of their pundits say they are, if they can do it against Penn State, against Michigan is going to be the more focal point of. They're going to be under a microscope against Michigan, because that's their big rival, and they've fallen short 2 years in a row by a pretty far margin. They have some catching up to do, at least as far as results go. So I guess we'll have to see how that works out. We're not going to know until that November 25th date when they go to Ann Arbor and they play there. But as far as the actual season itself, obviously I'm excited. When you have the kind of system and talent Ohio State does have, you do have the ability to have these high expectations, but this season does come with the understanding that they are going to be underdogs against Michigan. If both of those teams have the season they're anticipating to have, Ohio State's going to be the underdogs, and that's going to be a deserved outlook just based on the past couple of years. But hopefully for my sanity and the rest of Buckeye fans' sanity, the Ohio State Buckeyes can go into Michigan and finally find some semblance of a complete game against Michigan, because if it's a 3rd year in a row of losing to Michigan, probably also meaning no Big Ten championship, probably also meaning no playoffs, because the scenario that got them into the playoffs last year was crazy and not very likely to happen again anytime soon, then I do think there are serious conversations to be had about the direction of the Buckeyes football team. So that's going to do it for this video. You can let me know what you think about this schedule and Ohio State's chances down in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. If you didn't make this far into it, leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe if you'd like to see more like it. I'll see you at the next one.